The session had been running for 4 hours before anyone noticed I had stopped taking notes. That was deliberate. A man stops writing in a room like that, and the council reads it as defeat, as a representative who has given up arguing and is simply waiting for the vote to land. They prefer that version of events. It is tidy. It lets them move on to the next item on the agenda without the friction of a formal objection being entered into the record. I let them believe it. My name is Cale Morrow. I held the title of Infrastructure Remediation Liaison, Terran Compact Office, a designation so procedurally buried in the Joint Remediation Authority's organizational chart that most of the Ethran counselors across the chamber floor had never bothered to learn it. I was not a diplomat. I was not military. I was the man who read the engineering reports that no one else wanted to read, filed the compliance forms that no one else wanted to file, and sat in rooms like this one for hours at a stretch, while alien bodies in ceremonial robes decided what to do with the damage they had already done. I had been doing it for 11 years. I was very good at being invisible. The authority convened, in theory, to manage the remediation of contamination events across joint-administered colonial space. In practice, on that particular morning in the 43rd year of the Compact's existence, it had convened to bury one. The contamination event in question was catalogued under Internal Reference Number 7 Ethran Remedial 1409. The colonists who had lived through it called it something simpler. They called it the Saravan sickness. 42 years of subterranean biological exposure on the colony of Saravan's Ridge, a slow-acting neurodegenerative agent that had leached upward through the water table from a decommissioned Ethran engineering facility, abandoned and improperly sealed when the Compact consolidated its outer-tier infrastructure network in the colony's early decades. 3 generations of settlers had absorbed it. The long-term neurological effects were documented, peer-reviewed, and not in dispute. What was in dispute was who had known, and when, and whether the Compact's own remediation compensation clause, Article 19, which required automatic medical fund activation upon confirmed biological exposure of a settled population, had ever been properly triggered. The Council's position, stated with the practiced calm of a body that had rehearsed it, was that the event had been classified as a low-probability anomaly at the time of its initial detection, that the anomaly classification had been reviewed and sustained on 3 subsequent occasions, and that a low-probability anomaly did not meet the threshold for Article 19 activation. The reclassification motion before the authority today would formally cement that interpretation into the record as settled administrative doctrine. After that, there would be no legal path to compensation. The colony's medical claims filed by families, by physicians, by Terran legal advocates over 2.5 decades would be extinguished. The file would be closed. It was a clean piece of work, the kind of institutional maneuvering that leaves no visible fingerprints because it uses the institution's own language to do the damage. I had spent the previous 3 sessions not arguing. I had spent them reading. The Ethran Compact's remediation archive is not a single database. It is a layered system, public filings on the surface tier, internal bureau correspondence in the middle tier, and at the bottom, a sealed technical stratum that predates the Compact's current administrative structure and is technically accessible to any registered remediation officer under Protocol 11 of the Archive Governance Accord. No one used Protocol 11. It required a written request, a 48-hour processing window, a secondary officer co-signature, and navigation of a filing interface so archaic it had last been updated before Saravan's Ridge had running water. I had filed the Protocol 11 request on the second morning of the first session. I had the co-signature from my deputy within the hour. The processing window closed on the 3rd morning. The interface took me 6 hours to navigate. What it returned was a single document, 41 years old, stamped with the seal of the Ethran Bureau of Colonial Engineering, classified internal, never submitted to the public tier, and never referenced in any of the 3 subsequent anomaly reviews. It was a Level 4 biological exposure assessment, prepared by the Bureau's own field survey team in the 2nd year after the facility's decommissioning. It named the agent. It named the water table vector. It named the affected population radius, which encompassed the entirety of Saravan's Ridge's settled core. And it recommended, in language that was not ambiguous, immediate notification to the colonial administration and activation of the compact's emergency remediation protocols, the direct precursor to what would later be codified as Article 19. The Bureau had received it, logged it, and reclassified it as a low-probability anomaly within 72 hours. No notification had been issued. No protocols had been activated. The document had been there for 41 years, in their own archive, under their own seal. When the presiding counselor, a gray-robed Ethran elder named Sarath Val, called for the reclassification vote to proceed to final affirmation, I stood up. The chamber did not go quiet immediately. It takes a moment, in a room that large, for the fact of a single person rising to register across the full arc of the council floor. Then it went quiet. Sarath Val looked at me. He had the look of a man who had expected the vote to be uncontested and was recalibrating. I did not raise my voice. I said, before the affirmation is entered, I would ask that the authority consider one document. I placed it on the presentation rail. The archive's own retrieval system displayed it on the chamber's central projection surface. The Ethran Bureau of Colonial Engineering's seal in the upper right corner, the 41-year-old date stamp below it, the Level 4 classification header above the body text. I said, this is Catalog Item Protocol 11 7 Ethran Engineering Internal 0041. It was filed by the Bureau of Colonial Engineering in the 2nd year after the Saravan facility's decommissioning. I would ask the presiding counselor to read, for the record, the recommendation contained in Section 3. Sarath Val did not move for a long moment. The chamber was very still. There is a particular quality to the silence in a room full of people who are simultaneously reading the same document and understanding what it means. It is not the silence of confusion. It is the silence of a calculation being revised. One of the secondary counselors, I did not know his name, only his species, a long-limbed Ethran subspecies with a narrow cranial ridge, leaned forward and said something to Val in a low register. I did not catch it. It did not matter. Sarath Val read Section 3 aloud. He read it in a flat, careful voice, the way a man reads something he wishes he did not have to read in front of witnesses. The recommendation was 11 sentences. It took him approximately 40 seconds. When he finished, the chamber remained still for another long moment. I said, I have no further questions. I sat down, I picked up my pen, I began taking notes again. The reclassification motion was not put to a vote that session. It was formally tabled for independent review. The independent review, under compact procedure, required the appointment of an external auditor, a process that, once initiated, could not be halted by the authority without a full compact council override, which no one was prepared to call for a colonial remediation matter that now had a 41-year paper trail attached to it. The review concluded 14 months later. I was not in the chamber for that session. I was on Saravan's Ridge, walking the settled core with a Terran medical team, explaining to colony administrators what Article 19 activation would mean for their intake process. The review had found, as a matter of settled administrative fact, that the Level 4 assessment had been improperly reclassified, that the reclassification had been made without scientific basis, that the 3 subsequent anomaly reviews had proceeded from a corrupted evidentiary foundation, that Article 19's threshold had been met, in full, 41 years prior. The compensation fund opened the following quarter. I have been asked since what I said to the council, what argument I made, what case I put to them that turned the vote. I did not make an argument. I did not put a case. I found a document. I placed it on a rail. I asked a counselor to read 11 sentences that his own bureau had written 41 years ago, and then buried in a tier of its own archive that no one had looked at since. They had built the labyrinth. They had just forgotten they put something in it. All I did was read the map.